After the recent Nintendo Direct, I could not help but notice that there was some negative discourse around remakes. Typically, Nintendo Directs end with some sort of big announcement, and these announcements are supposed to steal the show and be one of the reasons we get excited to watch to begin with. So I actually understand why some people were a little bit disappointed that the Direct ended with a remake. A lot of people aren't going to want to hear it, but I've actually held the opinion for a while now that, especially in its early years, the Switch has perhaps had an over-reliance on new definitive versions of Wii U games. A matter of fact, the main game I play is one of those games. I would even make the claim that the Switch has actually benefited a lot from the failure of the Wii U. The Wii U had a stigma, it almost felt like an unbuyable console, but it had some really good games. And the Switch had an unusually strong starting lineup of games because it was able to constantly port games over from the Wii U that most Switch owners just had never played. Over half of the top 20 selling Wii U games have been ported over to the Switch, which is kind of insane. And honestly, it was really unfortunate to be a Wii U owner as such, because it felt like we just didn't actually get many new games early in the life of the Switch as everybody else caught up. There were remakes back on the Wii U as well. Among the top 20 mentioned earlier, this list also included HD remakes of The Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. The 3DS had a lot of remakes too. It appears now that there will not be GameCube Online. My friend Jamie has actually predicted this, but it becomes apparent when you realize just how many GameCube games have recently received Switch remasters. And they likely don't want to get people asking questions about Melee as well, let's just call it how it is. But between all these remasters, remakes, and Wii U ports, you start to realize that sometimes new original games feel kind of rare for Nintendo. They've had a rich history and they seem to take full advantage of that. So when they reserve their big announcement for a remake, well, it can definitely indicate something. However, I'm not disappointed at all. As someone who is not afraid to critique Nintendo, I even think that we should give them a pass this time, because this was not an ordinary remake. Look, I'll admit it, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door was my favorite video game growing up. I'm clearly biased here, but I'm not saying this because my favorite game is the one getting the remake treatment. I am saying this because the Paper Mario series has had a complete identity crisis for 15 years now. This remake is not just another way to play Zelda on modern hardware. This remake represents a unique chance to restore a once-lost series to its former glory, and we cannot afford to blow this opportunity. I want to make it clear real quick that I am not a hater of modern Paper Mario, by the way. Many people did not like Sticker Star, myself included, but I have continued playing the games and believe that the series has rebounded in a lot of meaningful ways. A lot of fans grew up with these new games and grew attached to a lot of the same qualities that the older fans fell in love with a decade earlier. I really don't think that we're as different as we all seem to think. And what exactly are these qualities? Well, at its surface, Paper Mario is just an entry-level RPG. But I think what made it stand out to so many weren't things like deep gameplay mechanics or the most groundbreaking narratives of all time. It really just comes down to being a world that you want to exist in, and the creativity used in constructing said worlds. Being a Mario spinoff strictly adds to the game, I believe. Most of us played Mario growing up, but the original 2D side-scrollers were really just arcade-style games that left a lot up to the imagination. As such, we have a familiarity with the characters of this universe already, without much context as to what these characters are actually like. And we are naturally question askers, and this series takes place in a believable world rather than just a representation of one. And this world isn't just about stomping Koopas. Instead, you might help some Koopa character conquer his demons, have a heart-to-heart with a Shy Guy on a train, or even get brought to tears by one of those enemies in the first level of Mario 64. In Paper Mario, the Mushroom Kingdom you hear about genuinely feels lived in. Different toads have different names and styles, and each part of the map tends to be the home or destination to the many different species in the kingdom. For many of us, it was the first time we cared about a place in a video game. Many of us didn't really have to be sold on the characters of this game because we already liked Mario. This was just a classic Mario adventure, but with so much more creativity and stories to tell. The series originally seemed to recognize this. The first 3 games were all strong in this regard and all had striking similarities connecting them, all the way down to the most minute of details. So it made the release of Paper Mario Sticker Star, a title that seemed oblivious to everything that had worked up to this point, a major head-scratcher. Sticker Star was a game that technically had turn-based combat, but the game was designed in a way that did not really incentivize players to do battles to begin with. Many point to this as a crippling flaw, and I agree that it's bad, but I think it wasn't just this decision alone that made the battling feel pointless, but also just the lack of connection to the world at large. There's only one level in Sticker Star that really stood out as memorable to me in any way. The rest kind of just felt like a new Super Mario Bros. Game, not something that expanded upon the concepts in New Super Mario Bros. As a result of this all, the fanbase did not react well to this game, and I think Nintendo was not really a fan of the blowback either. Now, there have been a lot of interviews with the team behind Paper Mario in recent years that we will be talking about later, But one of the quotes about the newer games that did stick out to me is that they wanted to put an emphasis on creating memorable moments as opposed to focusing on a story. To many of us, the idea of this is crazy, but my takeaway is that they have actually succeeded in this regard. I just don't understand why it has to be one or the other. When I said I liked modern Paper Mario, I meant Color Splash 2, by the way, not just Origami King. A lot of us dreaded the world map when we saw this game announced, and rightfully so, but I will admit it was a big step up from Sticker Star, and a big reason for this is that they actually made each level very distinct. I remember the tiny huge forest, the circus level, the game show, the retro themed level, the restaurant, train, excavation site, and the entire pirate section very distinctly, and there are a lot more that I didn't mention as well. I'd like to see fun ideas like these again in future Paper Mario titles. The thing is, I don't think they have to stand in place of an overarching story. Matter of fact, they seem to be a perfect match with the chapter style of the original trilogy. The original games were very unique in my opinion because they had strong world building in each individual chapter. There was an overarching narrative that brought you to these places, but each of these chapters had its own story to tell. Even Origami King seems to kinda get this as well. But Super Paper Mario in particular did an excellent job of mixing these unique settings and environments that had their own stories with a main plot that was still something that would occasionally find its way back into these settings. In some ways, the newer games even had strengths over the old games. I personally think that the level design was better in the newer titles, and they never felt like hallways to get you from point A to point B. I admittedly thought that the pain hammer and confetti mechanics were good and really actually incentivized you to want to explore the world more. And I think that mixing this in with all the side quests found in the earlier entries could be a great match for future games. And one thing I think all Paper Mario fans appreciate is the writing in these games. It has a unique charm to it and always has, and I think a good mood is actually harder to capture than people realize. This is something that hasn't gone away in recent entries, even if I think we all hope for more ambitious stories to come back and complement them. So again, I want to reiterate, a lot of good has come from the recent Paper Mario games, and many people have referred to them as steps in the right direction. But those words have always felt hollow to fans of the older games. To me personally, this isn't out of some hatred for the newer titles, it is just because I think that these newer games could just be so much better if they combined many of the best aspects of each entry in the series. Unfortunately though, that has appeared to be impossible. And this of course was due to the interviews I already mentioned. In the past, the main producer for the series, Kensuke Tanabe, has revealed that things like modifications to Mario characters were just not possible anymore. This is of course ridiculous, it's always technically possible, you can do it, but the orders come from the higher ups. There have also been articles revealing that Miyamoto has also been responsible for suggesting that the series doesn't need a story anymore after they got back results in a Club Nintendo survey for Super Paper Mario suggesting that people didn't really pay attention to the story at all. This whole thing was silly in hindsight because most people really did not take the Club Nintendo survey seriously. I am pretty confident that most people just auto-selected gameplay when talking about things that they liked about each game just to rush through the survey as quickly as possible because they wanted to get their gold points. And at least my impression back then was that there was likely a huge presence of bias in all of these surveys, which is fine but not something I would be making big decisions off of. Regardless of the exact reasoning for why it all went down though, Paper Mario clearly changed, and after the most controversial Paper Mario had been released, they doubled down by making a sequel to it in Color Splash. I've already mentioned that I liked Color Splash, but it was one of the roughest game announcements that I have ever seen. The reveal trailer did the game absolutely no justice. It looked completely bland, it had generic toads falling out of some house in an almost taunting way to the people that criticized Sticker Star. It was tone deaf. It felt unconfident, and to top it all off, they just casually put it in the middle of a direct and moved on seemingly as quickly as humanly possible.
Something is very wrong.
To Paper Mario fans, it felt like a massive insult. This series was a big deal to us. There was a time where not only did I consider it to be as important of a game as the main series Mario titles, but I actually found it to be a level above them. And perhaps this was part of the reason they didn't want the Paper Mario games to stand out too much to begin with. Around this time, Arlo kind of became the spokesperson for old Paper Mario fans. In his main video about the topic, I think he summarized it in the right way. A new Paper Mario announcement should be treated as a big deal, so to see it thrown in the middle of a random direct was just sad. A massive mistake is one thing, but it just felt like they were deliberately tanking the series. But there was also the fear that if nobody bought it, then Nintendo would just come to the conclusion that nobody likes Paper Mario anymore. Even in more recent years, when asked about Mario RPGs, Nintendo has said if you like Mario RPGs, to just play Mario and Luigi. Now, I like those games as well, but they were different. And the frustrating thing is that these titles could all coexist. They had done so successfully for years, and both of them were great at the same time. While the Color Splash trailer was the lowest point for the series, and in a particularly dark time for Nintendo, 7.5 years later, it still felt like we had lost the battle. The Switch offered some hope to fans of the series because it brought back so many older Nintendo fans, and all the games being produced were were great. The culture felt more positive again, and it felt like Nintendo was listening to the fans again. It felt like a return to form could actually be in the works for Paper Mario as such, and then the Origami King came out. The game was fine, good even, but it did kind of solidify to many fans that Paper Mario was never going to truly go back to being what it was. There were always going to be these random little rules that the developers had to follow that prevented the game from truly being great. There would always have to be some gimmick, some oddly weird focus on paper, a simple story, and no unique character designs to complement unique dialogue. And this was all frustrating because Intelligent Systems still clearly had it in my opinion. I could see bits and pieces of the Paper Mario I remembered growing up with all throughout these recent games. So the announcement of a Thousand Year Door remake is not just Nintendo announcing another remake. It was big news. It was unfathomable, actually. This was not even a middle of the direct kind of announcement. This was their closer. To place so much confidence in this game as a remake is crazy. It still doesn't feel real to me. This being announced before the Super Mario RPG remake is even out is even crazier. But it feels like a genuine nod to Paper Mario fans of old. It feels like they're showing us that they are willing to listen and that they know that the game means a lot to many people. This remake will be the first Paper Mario game to release with the original Paper Mario formula in 20 years since the original Thousand Year Door, and there aren't any limitations on character designs. Partners are back as we remembered them and the battle system remains intact. It looks the part. Now, this remake doesn't necessarily mean that Nintendo has suddenly changed their mind on the direction of the Paper Mario series, and maybe they just wanted to make a kind gesture and allow people to finally play this game in a proper way. But regardless, this is a huge opportunity because if this game is successful and sells well, this will make a massive impression. We have power as consumers, and that power doesn't come from a dislike button or a well thought out and organized list of complaints. Few things in this world talk quite like money does, so we need to support this game, because it might be our only opportunity to show Nintendo that we still want games like this one in the future. The original game sold just alright. This is mainly because the GameCube was not a console with tons of sales, but we are lucky that this is being remade on the Switch because a lot of people will have a chance to play this game as such. I wouldn't expect it to outsell Origami King, but I think it needs to be somewhat close to Origami King's sales to really be noticeable. So if you are someone who liked the Thousand Year Door and want to see Paper Mario return to form, I would support this game regardless of what your stance on remakes are. I think that the stakes are that important. One of the great things about TTYD and even many games on the GameCube era was the amount of effort that they put into their games. One thing I always thought was cool about this game was that in between chapters you could talk to Luigi in the main hub, who happened to set out on his own parody adventure similar to yours. While Mario was out searching for crystal stars, Luigi was out searching for marvelous compass pieces. Luigi would recap his adventures to you, and the game made a joke about you and your partner characters falling asleep every time he talked, but they gave Luigi his own surprisingly grandiose theme that would play while he told his tale. Now, I never thought we would get a remake of this game, but man, I really hope that they do something with Luigi, because it could be the perfect way to incentivize buying this game again for the people who have already played it. It could act as a way to create a new Thousand Year Door style game with Luigi as the protagonist even. And I don't think that this is going to happen, but one can dream, I suppose. Regardless of what happens, this still looks like a very good remake, and this is still the Thousand Year Door. This is one of the greatest Mario games ever made, and in my opinion, a must play for any Switch owner. If you haven't played this game before, I really hope you do give it a chance, because it is special, and I would also encourage some friends to try it out as well. This is a game that deserves to be played and remembered, and I just love that it's back. I still can't believe it, and it means a lot to me, and I know I'm not alone on that. I know there are going to be a lot of people out there that just say that they can play the original still, or that they can, play it in a different kind of way and all of that, and that is frustrating to me. And trust me, I'm not the kind of person that, just likes buying products because I'm a big Nintendo fan. I don't have pom-poms or anything like that. But this is kind of an exception because this isn't just about the Thousand Year Door. This is about the future, and for the first time in a very long time, I have genuine hope that Paper Mario can not just come back to what it was, but even transcend its previous highs. Thanks for watching.